Take it away, Lindsay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hi, everyone. I am Lindsay VanHulle. I am a state government reporter for Bridge Magazine in Lansing. I'm here with Dennis Cowan, a partner at the Plunkett Cooney law firm in Bloomfield Hills, and Ron Hall, president and CEO of Bridgewater Interiors. We're going to be talking today about the question, does business have a political party? We've got about 15 minutes, so let's jump right in.
Great.
All right. So when people think of the Republican Party, it's fair to say, you know, people sort of associate that with as the party of business. Is that still the case? Do you think, you know, given where we are today, that that's still a fair association?
Well, full disclosure, I'm a former mayor of Royal Oak, and I was also the chairman of the Oakland County Republican Party, so I'll make the case that the Republican Party still is the party of business. Certainly we have a governor here who's a businessman. We have a legislature that's worked very hard to reduce the tax burden and also the regulatory burden here in the state to give a level playing field for both large and small businesses. At the federal level, we just had tax cuts, which will help business, and I think we started to see the effect of that with more hiring and sharing of bonuses, as well as deregulation. And our president, President Trump, is a businessman. So I would make the case that we still have a strong alliance with business and the Republican Party. There's always room for improvement, but I think over the test of time and even today, that's the case.
Ron, what about you?
I have a little bit different view. I won't surprise you. I think that it is less true than it used to be that the Republican Party is clearly the party of business. One of the things we have talked a lot at this conference and heard from the stage several times about how business people have much more in common in our alignment on views with issues facing the state than those on which we disagree. And I agree that we need to be focusing on the things that we all agree on, because as we heard Tanya Allen say eloquently yesterday, that's 70% of what's going on. I know that the business community in the last few years is increasingly leaning in on issues that have more traditionally been associated as being championed by the Democratic Party. I know that Democratic Party candidates and elected officials are at the forefront of talking with business leaders about what's important to bring the region back for everyone. And business people are understanding that, you know, we've all got to get in some more common boats if we're going to row the entire effort forward.
And what's interesting is that we've seen this shift in the Republican Party and really in both parties toward kind of the poles, you know, the extremes, the far left or the far right. You know, and that polarization really started before the election in 2016. But what do you think is causing it, and where does that really leave business? Well, the reality is business has to navigate through whichever party is in power at whatever level. I work with businesses at the local, state, and federal level, and whether their leanings are Democrat or Republican doesn't matter. What we need to do is navigate through the system. And you find different variations. You may have a local town that's more Democratic leaning, and you have to make the case for your project or your business or whatever you're going to do. So I think business tends to have to navigate those waters even if things are polarized. What they try to do is find a common background or a common theme so that they can move their business forward in the community or in the state.
Yeah, I mostly agree with that. I think that there's a huge opportunity for the business community to be a moderating influence on the extremes of debate, and I think that's a good thing. I think that moderation is a good thing as we seek consensus on the issues that have to be resolved to move the entire region forward. And this sense I get from business people is increasing. It feels increasingly lonely in the middle. And I think that's exactly why you see the business community stepping up more and more. I think that's, you know, highlighted by the agenda of this conference, to engage, because we recognize that, you know, again, we're all in this together, and we've all got to get to some consensus so that we can move forward.
And just to add to what Ron had to say, look, at business leaders are problem solvers, and I think it's important that the businesses, and we've done it at this conference, tell the elected officials what we need, whether it's in regional transportation, education. We need to tell the elected leaders what we need and then have to really strongly advocate for it. Because at the end of the day, sometimes government takes a little bit longer to get there, but the reality is today, in the business world and in the economies, in the global economy, we don't have time to waste anymore. We have to get to it and get it done.
Well, and it's often, sort of seen that, that there's that tension almost between how fast, the speed of business and the speed of government, that sometimes, business and technology move faster than government and policy can keep up. When we think about what business wants today, there's always kind of the standard argument, tax policy, regulatory policy. But, we've heard a lot this week at the conference about, the need for education reform, the need for talent initiatives, the need for transit that can connect our regions. How has that kind of conversation evolved, certainly under the last 7 years of the governor's administration, but also looking forward into the future about the kinds of things that business is really going to need state policymakers to lead on?
I think there is an increased appreciation for the regionalism that is necessary to move us forward. And I think some of that's probably lessons learned from the recession and the climb back. I think some of that is some of the unique challenges we face now as we see, for example, that the state has fallen farther behind the median in education achievement, and business community has begun to feel that in the labor workforce as we try to, acquire the right talent to move our businesses forward. I just think that that's the name of the game. I just keep coming back to we've all got to get in the boat, work on the issues that we know exist together, and press. And I think, to your point, Dennis, that business leaders are good at that, solving those kinds of problems and helping elected leaders understand that, we understand that you have a lot going on that might not be directly on the business agenda, but indirectly it all matters, and you've got to be able to prioritize the core issues that are necessary to move the region forward.
And a classic case is what we talked about at the conference this week, the whole mobility world. And that is coming fast and furious. And I'm pleased to see that in the Michigan legislature, they are working closely with business to have the correct legislation and laws that will facilitate, as well as appropriations and for the mobility center and things of that nature. So that's encouraging, but this is coming fast and furious, and our competitors around the world are not going to wait. So we have to really educate the legislature and those at the federal level, our Congress people, to understand what Michigan needs to remain very competitive in this mobility technology world that we're entering into.
In your view, what is necessary right now to make Michigan competitive from a business standpoint? People like we talked earlier. The tax and regulatory side came up a lot, I think, but we've seen a lot of movement in that area over the last 8 years. And so, what's the top issue now? For you, what's the biggest priority? Well,
for Ron has got a business, and I know he'll talk about this, but the #1 issue is workers. And talent. I deal a lot in the world of getting projects approved. I've got clients with 10 construction projects right now. Every one is behind schedule. There's not enough skilled trades. Whether it's in the factory or out in the construction trades, we need talented workers. So that is the #1, I think, issue for business right now.
I agree with that, and I would also say, probably second would be consistency from local and state levels of government. One thing that businesses hate is unpredictability. I make business plans today for 3 and 5 and 8 years from now. I need to have a sense for what I can count on in terms of what infrastructure improvements are coming, what's going to be changing, if anything, with the tax and regulatory structure, and so on. And so I think that the more we have elected officials on the same page with business firms and job creators in terms of, again, what the priorities are. These are the things we're going to try to fund. These are the things that are going to have to wait. These are the tough choices we're going to make. Even if we don't have all of the details on some of that planning. I think that directionally, it's very comforting for the business community. You talk about wanting to attract investment, get more companies to come, being able to retain companies. That kind of tone is very important.
And just to add, the infrastructure of the state. I hate to bring up the sore topic of roads, but we move our products. We're a product-driven state, and we move our products on the road and the raw materials, as well as the boats that go here through the under Mackinac Bridge. But so that is a really key issue, and we've got to get about solving that problem also for business.
You know, when we talk about certainty and predictability, I mean, that certainly is key from a business standpoint. You know, we're at the end of a governorship. You know, that kind of transition in administration is natural and normal. But as you're looking at the governor's race, you know, this year in particular, and you know, the change in the legislature as well, when you look, thinking it through it, you know, thinking about it through that certainty, that predictability lens, what do you look for, I guess, in candidates or in a party that, you know, to make the case now to these candidates about the kinds of things that are really important to you, to ensure that kind of transition goes seamlessly so that there's not that upheaval and uncertainty about, you know, how things are going to be?
I really want to see the state maintain the course on dealing with some of the tough issues. We're finally talking about and getting to some meaningful pension funding reform. We are talking about putting more money in the classrooms for teachers. We have begun to fund the roads there and other infrastructure. There's still a long way to go. This is, of course, a state policy conference, but I think there's a lot of discussion to be had about additional assistance that needs to come from the federal government. We were talking earlier about education and the funding gaps for special education, despite the federal mandate for that, for example. Matching funds that are available for transit that we can't get to because we can't stop squabbling among ourselves. I think we need to see the state continue to press ahead on those issues. I am a big fan of fiscal responsibility, and I think that, you know, whether you agree with all of his policies or not, I think that the governor is to be, and again, full disclosure, I am one of the governor's appointees to a government commission. But I think there's a lot to be said for the budgeting process that's been brought to the state, and the multiple year look-aheads and the coming in on budget year after year. We're seeing that in Wayne County from Mr. Evans. We're seeing that in the city with Mayor Duggan. And I think that kind of fiscally responsible leadership at all levels, Democrat and Republican, is critical if we're going to continue to ride this wave forward.
I agree 100%. Governor Schneider did the job he was asked to do by the voters in Michigan. He laid out what he was going to do. He moved forward. He got it done with the legislature, working hand in hand. And I think that's really important. We need to have the next governor, whoever it is, needs to have a good working relationship with the legislature. We could have a split. You know, we could have Democrats in charge of one house or the other, and we don't know what party the new governor is going to be from. But the point is, Governor Schneider has set the stage. The next governor has to continue the improvement for the benefit of business and citizens here in the state of Michigan.
Well, we've got to wrap up soon, but I did want to follow up. You know, in the beginning, you know, Dennis, you had said, you know, the Republican Party is still the party of business. You know, Ron, you had said a lot of the things that business leaders are kind of clamoring for now often are in line with some of the Democratic priorities. You know, in your view, kind of last question, you know, is there one party right now that you think is really receptive to the needs of business more than the other?
Well, I'd make the case not only is the Republican Party more receptive to business, but I think they're more receptive to the workers. If you look today in Michigan, what we have is we can't fill the jobs we have. Wages are going up, and the jobs are increasing, so that's all very positive. So I think that because of the working with business, I think we've seen now that it's created by decreasing taxes, decreasing regulation, it does create jobs.
Let's be about issues instead of political parties. That's what I'd say.
All right. Thank you very much, and thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, very good.